Carrie Fezza here. Welcome back to Zodiac Buzz. Today I want to look at retrograde planets since so many of the planets are retrograde right now. When we look at retrograde planets, we look at the ones that are going to have the most effect to us here on Earth. And again, those are going to be mostly the personal planets. And right now the bridge planets are retrograde too. So I'm going to give you my take on what I think it means, and you're welcome to reach out to me at azodiacbuzz@gmail.com if you have something you want to add to that. And see if it just doesn't apply to what's going on right now. When we look at the personal planets, we usually look at the sun through Mars, but the sun and the moon aren't technically planets, so they can't retrograde. All the other planets in the zodiac at different times, given their orbit, will appear to be moving backwards in the zodiac in relation to Earth. Mercury is the most significant because it's the closest to Earth, and 3 times a year it will appear to be going backward for 3 weeks at a time. The next Mercury retrograde is June 17th or 18th, depending on what time zone you're in, and it'll stay there to July 12th. But you want to attach at least a couple weeks on each side, making it almost a 2-month period until it gets back to the point it was we're in retrograde. A lot of people will say, oh, Mercury's going retrograde tomorrow, thank God. I mean, Mercury's going direct tomorrow, thank God. That's the worst day because that's the day it's actually stationing to change direction. So when the day it goes retrograde and the day it goes direct, absolutely the worst days to plan important things if you can help it. And within that 2-month time period, you want to be really cognizant of the things that Mercury rules, like communication or transportation. When any of the planets go retrograde, it's a good time to reevaluate or reset yourself. With Mercury, you want to rethink things. Therefore, you got to be really careful what you say and how you say it. Because even if you say something innocently enough, it might be misconstrued or miscommunicated. Mercury retrograde is when cell phones drop calls, computers get really, really slow. The light comes on in the car, but there's nothing wrong with it. Anything with communication and transportation is going to get glitchy. It's also a really good time, if you can avoid it, to not sign contracts or documents, especially if you're buying a car. It's a transportation device, and if you can avoid it, you don't want to purchase anything major like a house during that time either. The key thing with Mercury retrograde is things that you start during that time period. That's why we want to avoid starting new projects, is because they'll probably have to be redone. Anytime you can put RE in front of something like retrograde, those words apply. So with Mercury retrograde, we're looking at redoing, rebuilding, again, rethinking, but it's also a good time for reconnecting, reaching out to people from your past, or you just might be hearing from someone from your past. It's a good time to finish up old projects that you have started. It's like I said, it's a time for reset. Instead of moving forward, go back and complete whatever needs to be finished up. Okay, that's Mercury. When we get to Venus, Venus rules love, money, things of pleasure and value. So when Venus is retrograde, we want to reassess those things. Venus has been retrograde now since May 13th, and it'll go direct in a couple weeks on June 25th. So my personal take on Venus retrograde, being the very feminine planet, is she can be a real bitch. It is kind of brings out the worst side of femininity. Not always, but it's a good idea to be mindful of your affairs with women. As Venus relates to romance, it might be going back over relationship issues, make or break time. It could also be a time for reconnecting, but that reconnection might only last as long as the Venus retrograde. But it's definitely a good time to go back and work out problems. It's probably not the best time to go on a spending spree since Venus rules money. It would be a good time to reassess your finances and reassess your values. Then we have Mars, okay? Mars actually won't go retrograde until September. It'll be retrograde from September 9th until November 13th. It'll go direct right after the election. So what can that mean? Excuse me. What can that mean during the pre-election period? It can be frustrating. Don't forget, Mars is your energy, it's your drive, your ambition. So when it's retrograde, it's internalized, which can be frustration. It can be repressing anger, which can lead to depression. So you want to check your mental health, as your drive, your ambition might be stifled, or you feel challenged, well, more challenged while Mars is retrograde. It's also a good time to go back and re-debate old issues. So be careful for stirring up old debates when Mars goes retrograde. Jupiter, our first bridge planet, luck, abundance, expansion. It covers such a wide range of topics that when it's retrograde, it gives us a lot to go back and reflect on. Jupiter went retrograde the day after Venus. The two benefic planets are moving backwards. It will go direct on September 12th. So Jupiter is generally optimism. So when it's retrograde, it can be restrained optimism or repressed joy. It could be a reversal of luck, and since it rules gambling, I don't think it's a really great time to gamble right now. And gambling can apply to a lot of different things, but that's up to you. It's a good, Jupiter rules long distance travel, so if you have to travel or you want to travel, if you can travel, you might want to revisit places you've already been. And that can apply to Mercury too. Since it applies to transportation, you probably want to take an airline that you've taken before. You are revisiting that same airline, revisit the same air places, reuse the same companies you've used before if you're traveling well. Mercury's retrograde and Jupiter retrograde. Revisit some of the same places. I wouldn't advise visiting someplace new. What else does Jupiter rule? It rules faith and philosophy, so it's a really good time to reassess your faith, reevaluate your philosophy, and recheck your conscience, and maybe reset your moral compass. All things to do while Jupiter's retrograde until September. Now, almost simultaneously, while Jupiter's retrograding, so is Saturn, the other bridge planet. Saturn went retrograde on May 11th, and it'll stay retrograde until September 29th. So almost parallel with Jupiter. It's in a different sign, but it's going to retrograde from Aquarius back into Capricorn with Jupiter. Saturn tends to slow things down anyway. It's sort of taking the long road, gathering that experience in order to reach your goal, and when you get there, you can stay there. So when it's retrograde, it might make the journey extra slow. 1 step forward, 3 steps back. That's how Saturn retrograde can feel. It's hardships. It can be health issues, again, like depression. But it's also a good time to restructure those goals and rebuild or remodel what you have set forth for yourself without actually physically remodeling something. So retrograde planets are a good time to go within. And while everything's retrograde now, it's just a really good time to take a step back and not react. Sometimes it's hard to do, and it'll be interesting to see when these planets go forward how it affects things. Now, the outer planets, again, are so far away, their effects aren't as personal. But the time to look at the outer planets is when they station to move backwards or forwards and when they switch signs, which I did another complete video on that called The Mundane Effects of the Outer Planets and a Potential Conflict for War, so you can check that out. This year, the most significant event is the election. So let's look at the outer planets. Uranus will go retrograde on August 5th and will remain retrograde until January 14th, right around the inauguration, which is scheduled to start on the 19th of January. Don't forget, Uranus shakes things up, and the week of the inauguration, it's going to be switching directions. Neptune is going to retrograde next week, again on the 23rd, and it'll be retrograde until November 28th, right after the election. Neptune pulls the wool over people's eyes. It's the great illusionist. So while it's retrograde, it might be setting forth all these ideals and these things that we're trying to achieve that maybe aren't based in reality. And right after the election, it comes to be a big reality check. Pluto has been retrograde since April 25th, and it will go direct in October 4th, about almost exactly a month before the election. Pluto rules power and control. So we'll have to see how that all manifests. But that's just an idea of what to expect when the planets are retrograde. And again, feel free to write to me at zodiacbuzz@gmail.com and offer me your own take. If you have any questions, I'll do a video, or I'll try and answer them when I do one of these videos. I'm not open for debate and I'm wrong and you're right. Astrology is open to many different interpretations. I have a lot of experience and a lot of education, so I'm always open to new ideas and new things. I learn from my friends. That's the beauty of astrology, is you can never stop learning about it. There's so many different places you can take it. Right now, I'm just starting with the basics to give you the foundation of knowledge, and then you can take that and do with it as you like. So thank you again for tuning in to Zodiac Buzz.